You can argue that all stories are about emotion, but not all emotions are represented the same, particularly the emotions around the themes of power and the story bits that tend to follow, and the theme of romance and its own little entourage seem to be at the core of most stories available, and other interesting emotional topics are there just to support those main themes. But things are changing. Different stories are finding huge audiences and critical acclaim. Stories that might involve power and romance, but that are not about those things. Today I want to explore one of those rising themes. I'm gonna call it meta-emotion. Stories that ask the question, what is it like to feel? It doesn't sound like much when it's in abstract terms like that, but give it a little push and this theme can go a long way. In the realms of Japanese animation, stories like that have been proliferating and thriving this past decade. Maybe times and tastes are indeed changing all over the world. Just last year, a very well-written series brought meta-emotion to high fantasy. So let's have a look at this incredible story. This video will contain no major spoilers for Frieren. I'm actually trying to convince you to watch it. I think it's brilliant. Frieren, Beyond Journey's End, is a story that doesn't start where you expect it to. The great evil that ravaged the land for centuries has been defeated. In fact, our protagonist Frieren had a major role to play there. But it is done, and 80 years have passed. Our former legendary heroes are very old, very battered. Except for her. You see, Frieren is an elf. She just doesn't age. She looks exactly as she did 1,000 years ago. That's the setup, but what's the plot here? What drives this character and this story? Frieren is ancient. She perceives time differently from you and me. At the end of their decade-long journey, Frieren turned to her companions and said, "It was really nice spending those 15 minutes with you. I'm gonna go now, bye." But 80 years after that, she's starting to understand that the time she spent with those people was actually pivotal to her personality. In many ways, it shaped how she behaves, how she makes decisions, how she feels about the world. So now that time marched on, inexorable as always, she's on a journey to reconnect with that chapter of her life and try to understand what made it so influential. If you're thinking to yourself,
this is the most boring part possible of this story. All the cool and important stuff already happened. Why would I watch this grandma reminiscing about the good old times?
then you might be thinking about this story in terms of power or romance. If you use a meta-emotion lens, then suddenly this setup is fertile ground. And by thinking in terms of meta-emotion, I believe we can enjoy those stories even more. So let's dive in. Let's explore a couple of fascinating questions Frieren is asking. Starting with, at the beginning of the show, both this important character here, called Fern, and us, the audience, we think Frieren's actions are kind of wacky, kind of nonsense. Why do you want to collect all those stupid sounding spells? Seriously, why would you want a spell that makes grapes as sour as possible? Truth be told, if this was a story from another character's perspective, we might just think that Frieren is an eccentric gal. She's just a bit cuckoo. Nothing wrong there. But since we follow the story through her perspective, we have access to flashbacks, and through them, we see that some of her nonsensical actions actually do make sense. It's just not logic-informed decisions, but rather emotion-informed decisions. I'm gonna lightly borrow from Carl Jung's cognitive functions here, just so we have a clearer idea of what we're talking about. Rational sense is facts-based. When you judge something using that cognitive function, the conclusion sounds almost inevitable. 4 is bigger than 3. This mountain is taller than my house. The decisions that come from this cognitive function are easy to understand. We don't have money to eat, so let's take this stupid job that pays very well so that we can afford dinner. Stands to reason. Emotions are different. They're about internal curation. It's about your preferences, your whims. Yellow is not better or worse than red, but you probably have a preference between them. Milkshakes or ramen, what's your favorite? You can't be wrong, you can't be suboptimal. it's just a preference. But here's the thing, the process of forming those preferences is linked to memory, even if we can't access that memory anymore. Your preference between red or yellow might be defined by the color of your first ever toy when you were a little baby. This is where Frieren shines, because we get to see the memories that create her whims, and suddenly we start to understand them. The basic example here is that once upon a time, hot guy Himeru told her, "It's really cool that you know all those spells. I admire you for that." Then she dedicates the next 100 years to obsessively collect more spells. Nice. But I have a better example that some people might not even have noticed. Remember when I mentioned that spell that makes grapes as sour as possible? That was episode 2. It's a minuscule scene. In episode 3, we see this exchange. "Tonight you feel like eating Merkur pudding, don't you?" says Himeru. "How did you know?" Frieren replies. He smirks. "You travel with someone for years and you pick up on things. I can just tell with you." She lowers her gaze. "I can't tell what any of you are thinking." Her companions look at her with concerned expressions. "Then we should put in more effort so you can get to know us better," says Himeru, smiling again. "Incidentally, my favorite food is rough omelette." "Mine's grapes," says Eisen. "The sour, the bitter." If you care to connect those two dots, suddenly Frieren is not acting on a nonsense whim. Suddenly her actions are quite deliberate. She wanted that strange spell because her strange friend has strange taste buds. It all connects. And this is a real process, we all experience this, we just normally don't bother to connect our own dots. Frieren is teaching you this Jungian theory in a really fun way through narrative, and the knowledge is actually useful in your real life. Every preference you ever had in your life has its origin in a memory, and Frieren is inviting you to think about it. This theme is at the core of the story, but it's not the only thing this show is about. The power-focused fantasy stories I mentioned before, the millions and millions of them, are generally good at portraying how to change the world in terms of destroying the bad bits of it. How to defeat the evil empire, how to defy the established oppressive regime. But what happens after that? Luke Skywalker learned how to fight with laser swords. How do you build a new and better society with this skill set? It's easier to write about the moment of destruction. The stakes and the end goal are clear. You know when the good guy succeeded. It's when the evil thing goes kaboom. Sometimes there's even a post-conflict scene to show us that everything turned out just fine. But just fine? How? What sort of world did these people create? If the evil thing is gone, what will this society rally around? What will they value? I don't think all stories should explore this theme, but Frieren does, and I love it. The two scenes that really land this theme for me involve this character here, Zeri. She's also an elf, but she's one violent elf. She believes the only purpose of magic is to kick ass and explode demons into tiny, tiny bits. I also believed that when I was 12. And over the centuries, she trains a lot of disciples with that same philosophy, including Frieren's own master, Frame, who also believes in kaboom. Kill the demons. But when Frieren finished her training a long time ago, this happened. "Tell me what spell you desire," Zeri says to the knelt elf girl. "I have knowledge of nearly every grimoire that's ever been written, but I shall grant you just one." "I don't want one," says Frieren, her voice without a shadow of emotion. "The greatest joy of magic lies in searching for it." Zeri smirks. "Frame, this girl is no good. She lacks a burning ambition." "Master," Frame stands up, "one day, this girl will defeat the Demon King. It will be a mage like her who clears the way to a peaceful era." "Are you saying a mage like me can't?" Zeri scowls. Frame is not deterred. I'm saying the Demon King can't be killed by one who seeks battle. We can't do it. Think about it, Master. Can you even begin to imagine yourself living in a world of peace? Cool. That's what I'm talking about. This lady gets it. So what happens when, 1,000 years later, Frieren's own disciple is offered the same boon by Zeri herself? Do you think she also refuses it, just like her master? No! She gets a legendary spell from the era of mythology that does the laundry for her. I need to study a decade of poetry to begin to describe my jealousy. Poof! All clean, with the herbal aroma. Fern choosing this spell of all spells is a proof of Frieren's success. A lot of mages have been trained by this worldview. That's why people associate mages with violence. But this scene shows us a new path for the future opening up. Fern is powerful, but she's also uninterested in violence. She'll have her own disciples, and their disciples will have disciples, and with each iteration, we'll see less murder and more laundry. Often these days, fantasy lacks optimism, and here's a rare counterexample. Look, I could carry on here. I could tell you how Frieren and Himeru's romance is powerful exactly because Himeru is dead. So Frieren is not trying to get anything from him. Instead, she's using this love as a mirror so she can understand herself. I could explore how Frieren, uninterested in being a regular quote-unquote hero, has to choose something else to be, something to withhold. And she chooses to carry the memories of the people so that they don't get lost. But if there's one thing I know about you, about the people who watch those videos and leave comments below, is that you're good at pattern recognition. You're really good, especially narrative patterns. You get it. So instead of carrying on explaining what you already understood, let's put it to use. That's why we study beauty over here, so that we can produce our own unique beauty later on. We're drawing inspiration from Frieren, so we want to keep some of its core aspects. And we're experimenting with meta-emotional fantasy. But of course, we want to create a story that's completely different, something novel. Here's one way to do it. Frieren explored the Jungian cognitive functions of thought and feeling. But those are not the only cognitive functions. Let's try our hand at a story about sensation and intuition. Sensation is your connection with the tangible reality. It's the present, the five senses, it's the body. It's manipulating the tangible. It's hammers and fire. Intuition stretches into the past and the future. It's cause and consequence. It's learning from past behavior to project future results. It's understanding associations. I think we can imbue the relationship between those two functions into characters. In our remote village, there's a ritual that happens once a child reaches the age of 10. A voyage between grandchild and grandparent, where the kids are taken to wonderful places and taught about the ancestry and history of their families. It's also a moment of familial bonding, connecting the newer and older generations in a way that only adventure can. It's Pilo's 10th birthday, and you'd imagine his adventure would be the grandest of them all. After all, his grandfather is a fabled hero with powers beyond anybody's comprehension. He's capable of peering deep into the past, beyond any mortal's memory, and also scrying into the future, into the yet-to-be. But Pilo is not exactly excited. There's a huge asterisk here. His famous and powerful grandpa, the hero of legend, over the years, has gone completely blind. That includes his incredible abilities. He can smell the past, he can predict the temperatures and sounds of the future, but he can't see anything. Pilo thinks that this voyage sounds like hard work.
There's a fork in the road ahead, Grandpa, Pilo says, barely hiding his disappointment. Ah, so we're there already. The old man turns to him. For a man who never opens his eyes, His eyebrows are quite expressive. Presently, they shoot up with mirth. "Which path would you like to take, boy?" Pilau deflates. "This is not how this works. You're supposed to guide me, to take me to... He pauses. "Somewhere." "But I am guiding you, just not in the way you expect." The old man chuckles and faces the two roads ahead. "So many boys your age are taken to the graves of their forefathers, or to the waterfalls where, well, once somebody watched me win a duel. But how many 10-year-old boys are guided into making their own decisions?" There's a road sign at the fork, unhelpfully indicating two names Pilau has never heard of before. "But I don't know what to choose. I've never been outside the village. You're the one who's supposed to teach me." "Pay attention, boy. I'm teaching you how to look further than your nose," says the grandfather, firm but kind. "Look around, since I cannot. Breathe in the world around you." To the right side of the fork, the road leads to the wetlands, following a shy creek that will eventually join a bigger river. To the left side, their path leads to the mountains, their peaks shrouded in mist. The old man continues, "The real question I'm asking you is, what do you like?" Pilau looks left, then right, and left again. "I don't know." "Good. How many 10-year-old boys actually know what they prefer and not what some dull grandparent told them to like? But as your guide, I'm willing to make this easier for you. Would you rather see some fish or goats?" The boy scratches his head. "I've never seen a real goat." "Off we go then," says the old man, stepping towards the left road. Pilau has a feeling he started walking before he answered, though.
This is a journey about emotional intelligence and the odd little ways humans connect to one another. The grandpa becomes the intuition of the journey, while Pilau needs to represent sensation, especially focus on sight. This feels like a meta-emotional story that can end up quite heartwarming. What do you think? Did this video spark your imagination? Did you think of a meta-emotional story yourself? Leave a comment below, let me know. Those comments make my day. And hey, have a look at other people's comments. Many times the comments people leave here are actually way more clever than the stories I come up with. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Jungian, I'm a Brazilian writer, and this channel here is my art research. This episode here really wanted to thank my friend Inka for his contribution, for adding a scene at the beginning and also reading the text at the end. Inka has sort of a brother channel to this one. Here we often discuss our ideas together and we support each other. So if you like this channel, there's an 100% chance you're gonna like his channel. I'm gonna link it everywhere. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel too. I've been trying to grow this channel. It's hard, man. YouTube is a grind, but it's such a pleasure to be here. It's so cool. It's the people I meet making those videos. Mwah. If you enjoyed this video, I think this other video here about how the premise in Princess Mononoke changes the whole vibe of the story might strike your fancy. A special thank you to my patrons. Thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you so much. I am trying to become a full-time professional. I am trying with all of my might, and you really help. Thank you. And I'll see you folks next time. Ciao.